Hello, welcome. You're watching Good Morning Weird Music History. I'm your host, Michael Merchant, aka Danger. And today, I'm going to be giving you some fun, cool, interestingly weird facts about music. Today's history lesson is about the one, the only, the king of rock and roll, ladies and gentlemen, Elvis Presley. This guy was a freaking hoot. This guy was a holler and a half. This guy lived a life and then some, let me tell you what. Elvis Presley, we're not going to talk about his whole life, but we're going to talk about some of the things I find cool, interesting, and weird because he's got plenty of it. All right, so let's jump right into it. We're going to talk about Elvis even before he took his first breath. Did you know that Elvis was a twin? That's right. Elvis had a twin brother, and I am thoroughly convinced that he overtook him in the womb. Because there can only be one king of rock and roll, baby. That's Elvis Presley. I find it super interesting and often wonder what it would be like. What is that parallel reality where Elvis and his brother made it out? Maybe made it out is not the right term, but what would that be like? Will we have two kings? Will we have no kings? Would they just be regular dudes? Maybe he would have gotten jealous and there would have been a murder-suicide. Who knows? It's all up in the air, but the undenied fact is that Elvis did have a twin brother. Crazy. What would that be like? Anyways, all right, let's move on. Our next weird fact. Did you know that Elvis had a pet chimp? He had a pet chimp named Scatter. Scatter the chimp was Elvis's right-hand monkey, and would go with him everywhere, apparently. I heard that he got him from the Memphis Mafia, or maybe they were just pictures where they were hanging out with the chimp. But Elvis did have a chimp. He had a pet monkey. All right. Next fact. Did you know that Elvis just gave away Cadillacs? He just gave away cars. Like, this dude had so much money. Apparently, he would, like, buy a car, test drive it for a few days, and then he would just give it away to, his friends, his family, even just random strangers he would give cars away to, which is crazy. There's even shows, like some of the antique shows, where they'll go and they're looking through old dusty barns and they find, Cadillacs with Elvis's, signature on it, which is crazy. He would just give away cars. Hook me up. I need help. I need a Cadillac. Wouldn't hurt. Would be nice. All right. Let's talk about the next fun, weird, and interesting fact about Elvis. Did you know Elvis is the second highest paid deceased celebrity? Only behind the one and only King of Pop, Michael Jackson. Which makes so much sense. I mean, their names are they've got such household names. Everybody knows them, has been listening to their music for so long. I mean, that makes perfect sense. King of Rock, King of Pop, understandable. But, dang, deceased celebrities, they're the second and first highest paid deceased celebrities. That's crazy to me. All right. We all know, let's get into some of Elvis's music. We all know that Elvis stole his music from the black man. I think we all know that and are in agreement. But did you know that Elvis stole or got his music from everywhere. This man supposedly performed over 600 songs. That is impressive. Let me tell you what. 600 songs. He performed over 600 songs. And didn't write not one of them. He didn't know how to read music. He could play the guitar, of course. He could play a little, but he couldn't read music. And he never once wrote a song, which I thought was super crazy. But I mean, he was just a performer. He didn't want to be a writer. He wanted to be a performer. So, and it clearly worked for him. So, all right. Out of all of those songs we just talked about, did you know that the only person supposedly to turn him down was the boss herself, Dolly Parton? Dolly Parton supposedly is the only person who ever turned down Elvis as far as songs. And that one song, the story goes, is that Elvis loved the song that Dolly had wrote. I think we all know it. That song got she turned him down. She basically was going to give it to Elvis. Dolly's manager came back and said, hey, if you give this song to Elvis, he'll own it. You won't have any, ownership over the song. And Dolly, being the boss that she is, was like, oh, no, well, I need to own my shit. So she ended up turning him down. And then that song was later recorded by Whitney Houston. I Will Always Love You. Crazy, right? What a record. And we know how that went. That's set in stone. That record went out of this stratosphere. And worked out for the best, I feel like. I mean, how crazy. If Elvis had done it, it would have just, would have been another probably popular song that people knew him from. But I think giving it to Whitney Houston was the best thing to ever happen. That is crazy. That is so cool, too. When I heard that story, I thought it was really sick. All right. Still on the topic of Elvis's music. Did you know that Lilo and Stitch, the original Lilo and Stitch, I know that we just had the new live action version of Lilo and Stitch come out, but we were talking about the original animated Lilo and Stitch. Did you know that Lilo and Stitch, the original animated movie, has more Elvis music than any of Elvis's movies? That's crazy. You gotta remember, Elvis was an actor. Elvis was in movies, and he played his songs in movies, and all of that. But Lilo and Stitch has more Elvis music than any of Elvis's movies. I thought that was pretty cool. I thought that was a cool fact. I like that one a lot. That's crazy. Okay. Now, take a little step away from the music and more of the man. Did you know Elvis, besides Canada, he never performed outside of the States? That's crazy. Supposedly, he never performed outside of the United States, besides a few times in Canada, and which I thought was really weird. It wasn't like he was like afraid to fly or go out of the country or anything, because he was in the army. Another interesting fact: he actually met his first wife when he was in the army, and I think he was stationed. I think he was stationed outside of the country, and his wife, or his first wife, he met. She was, I think, like the general's daughter, and she was 14 years old. Elvis was 24 when they met. That is crazy. All right, a couple things to unpack. Okay, it was a different time. Not an excuse. Not cool, dude. That's predatory shit. That's crazy. 14 years old. He was 24. He was pulling a Drake, or should I say Drake was pulling an Elvis. That's wild. It's creepy. But 14, 24. It's 10 years apart. That's fucking insane. Okay. Anyways, all right. Let's move on from that. Okay, well, speaking of his wife, okay, let's talk about his wife. She was in a Times article that I read earlier that has to do with my next topic. She says that Elvis was, because he was in the army, he was also a fanatic over guns. He was a big gun fanatic. And he also liked collecting badges, like police badges, cop badges, which ended up, while he's collecting badges, he ended up writing to then President Nixon, basically saying that he wanted to, he could relate to the kids and he could talk to the kids about the war on drugs, and that, you know, he could be a fighting chance against the war on drugs, is what he read. And they actually ended up meeting, and he gifted the president a Colt 45 pistol, and basically asked the president for a Federal Bureau of Narcotics badge, which was crazy. And what his wife, Priscilla Presley, said about it, this was in a Times article that I'm reading, I'll put it up here too. The narc badge represented some kind of ultimate power to him, Priscilla Presley, Elvis's then wife, wrote in her memoir, Elvis and Me. With the federal narcotics badge, he believed he could legally enter any country, both wearing the drugs both wearing the guns he wanted and carrying the drugs he wished. Holy shit. Okay, so basically Elvis told the president he wanted to help him beat the war on drugs. Also, he could get a badge to allow him to take his guns and his drugs wherever he wanted. That's insane mentality. That's crazy. He wanted to take all his drugs with him. That is hilarious.
Vicious, straight razor toting woman.
To Nixon, to the president of all people. I was talking to my dad. My dad said apparently he just, after he wrote that letter, he like later on just showed up to the White House. He showed up to the White House gates, and they bust. He said, you tell Nixon and it's Elvis. They let him in, which led to this infamous picture of them standing together, which also led into a bunch of conspiracies about like him being in Watergate, and Nixon wanting him to work to fight the war on drugs, and to get John Lennon was involved somehow. They also later said Elvis faked his death, and then that Elvis is still living out in the desert somewhere in Vegas or something. Like, I don't know. All the videos I watched were like bad production, saying that, you know, the conspiracy theories, but they're fun. They're very much fun, and it is a good rabbit hole to go down. If you would like to know more, just look up Elvis Watergate or Elvis and Nixon conspiracy. You'll find it. It's pretty good. All right, story time.
I'm just starting to get my cock going.
This is the last fact about Elvis I'm going to give you today, but I promise it is a good one. We're going to talk about when Elvis met Alice Cooper. Yes, the Alice Cooper you're thinking of. If you don't know who Alice Cooper is, he is known himself for being super weird, super out there, crazy stage acts, just a insane personality altogether. The story goes is that they were in Vegas and Elvis met Alice Cooper and knew Alice Cooper was known for doing crazy shit. And so, Elvis, if you didn't know, was a 7th degree black belt. Now, I don't know, it seems like it's given kind of like Steven Seagal vibes, but he was a 7th degree black belt, and so Alice Cooper and them, they talked about it. Apparently they knew. Well, knowing Alice Cooper was doing crazy shit and probably didn't believe that Elvis was a black belt, Elvis pulled out a gun, gave it to Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper held it in his hand, and he said in an interview that on one shoulder he's like, oh shit, if I kill Elvis, I'll be the guy that killed Elvis. But on the other shoulder he's like, oh shit, if I killed, I'll serve prison time, but and I'm the guy that killed Elvis. What do you do? In Alice Cooper's shoes, so he points it up at Elvis, and from what Alice Cooper said in the interview is that he kicked the gun out of Alice Cooper's hand and then took him to the drop kicked him or took him to the ground and choked him out. That is an insane story. Like Elvis, Alice Cooper, and he holds a gun up, and Elvis actually takes him down and proves that he's a black belt. That's crazy. Okay, so anyways, I hope you guys have fun. I'm Michael Merchant, aka Danger. This has been Weird Music History. Long live the king of rock and roll.